Hello and welcome to part two. We jump in now with discussing some of the history behind the 170.
So I got into it initially because a chap came around for a lesson who used to compete in a lot of the events, in like Game Fair had an event, and a lot of the casting the shops, something like John Norris had an event, and there was a few
Oh, yeah.
just a few of them who used to do this. And he wanted to get better, and he rang me up and he said, "I think you're the guy to come to." Now, I in retrospect, I wasn't, right, because there was nobody really teaching distance competition then. Anyway, he came round and I gave him a lesson. I said, I actually said, "Well, if I can't teach you anything, because I knew it was going to be pretty, if I can't teach you anything, I won't charge you, right?" Anyway, I had a lesson, and he was all very happy with it. And then at the end of the lesson, we had a competition. He just said, "I want to compete against you." I said, "Oh, okay." And he beat me, right? So he threw about 115 and I threw 105. And I know that my stroke that I was using, my technique, which I really developed, this kind of pulling down technique and got really good at it. I knew it went 105 feet, the flip flop. I knew it went 105 feet because that's how far it went, right? And I've been doing it for years. So I said, "Well, come back next week, John, and we'll just cast. No more, no more lessons, right?" And so he came back next week, and I spent all week, 4 hours a day, sometimes more, learning his technique. And then he came back the next week, and I managed to put it past him. But we were neck and neck, for years. He would come over every other week, every couple of weeks, and we would cast. And that's really where I learned. And then through Sexy Loops, I got other people who were interested to come along. And so we ended up having, 6, 8, 10 people sometimes casting in these competitions. And that was one of the things that lifted me. And I think the other big thing, particularly for the 5-way, was they used to have a competition in the States called the Best of the West. And there was, like Steve Rajeff, Tim Rajeff, Jim Gunderson, you've heard Rick Hartman was here. And
wow.
So you would get whole Ian Walker, a whole bunch of them. And I took videos of them. I went to the States when I did my FFF Masters in 2003 or whatever it was, or 2, I think. I went over there and I videoed them all, and I put videos of them up on Sexy Loops. So all of a sudden, you knew what these guys were throwing, which was generally about 115. Apart from Rick, who was throwing 120, but he looked like an elephant trying to cast, sort of running backwards and forwards. And I said, never going to learn that. But he was casting a long way. And then, so we I took all those videos, and then you knew on Sexy Loops, if you were a reader there, if you got the rod at that point was the TCR 5, right? So you get the TCR 5, you get the Mastery Expert Distance 5, which I think was called the XXD back then. It was very, same
names, isn't
it? And then you got that. You could compare yourself to Steve Rajeff, to Rick Hartman, and if you were throwing 100, that's because I did. And then you stand next to somebody like in these events, and they're casting 120, and you're casting 105. You're like, well, they're doing something different to me. I've got to learn what it is. And then there's another part to that. So about a year later, I met Rick again in Telluride. In fact, it might have been later that year. Anyway, next time I met him was in Telluride, where Scott Rodson made in Colorado, right? And we were casting in this field with all these mountains around, and he'd changed. He'd spent some time apparently with Bill Gamble, who tightened up his back loop, and I've never seen loops like this in the 5-way, and I thought, damn, I'm gonna have to learn to cast like Rick now. And that's really how the 170 sort of came into this, into the 5-way world in a way. So yeah, damn. But it's been
the 170.
Sorry?
Who do you think invented the 170, Rick?
Well, I mean, if you now talk to people like John Waters or the other guy who's posting on Sexy Loops, you can see that they were doing it in the ICSF events 30 years ago, 40 years ago. So, but in the 5-way world, and we didn't, in the fly casting world as that we know, that did not exist. We stopped the rod, we matched the casting up. But who really then developed it? So Rick, he was watching Jim Gunderson throw with this, like, and Jim's like built like a bear, you know, and really whacking the rod and being very competitive in it. And Rick just sort of took that. So he used to cast, and he developed it, you know, no question. And he cast, you know, 2 hours every day, or 2 times 2 hours. He ended indoor barn. It's not really a barn. It was a hockey rink down in Texas, and he would cast in there. And I went casting a few times down there with a lot of fun. So
Wow.
really good. I would love to see Rick go to the Worlds, and you know, I think it'd just be phenomenal. But one thing I've noticed over the last, particularly the last, because of the World from the last 10 or 15 years, a lot of people can do it now. There's a lot of very competitive casters in this, you know, whereas before there was probably only 4 or 5 or 6 who, with no wind, were kind of like above the rest. That doesn't exist now. You know, there's 80 people there who could all win it, you know. So
Wow, that's a good point.
That's improved. And I think that, you know, that's lifted the game. That's why casting in a group is really good, because it makes you, that's why competition is good. It's not about winning or losing. I mean, it kind of is, but it's not really. It's about, for me, it's always been about trying to become the best fly caster I can be. That's always been most important for me.
So for someone that wants to get a bit more distance, let's say they're casting 65 feet with a 5-weight, would you say that's a fair sort of?
Well, to go from 65 to 100, shall we say, or, you know, a jump, and it doesn't take that long, actually. I don't think. It's about sorting out the back cast, tracking is number one. Then it's about being able to shape loops, have control over the loops, and then it's about having a fast haul, developing a fast haul. And with that, I mean, you know as well as I do that it's not difficult at all to throw 100 feet, right? If you can throw 120, 100 is really easy. We get a nice carry, everything straight, fast haul, nice loop. It goes. You know, it's not a great deal of effort, but it's not, and it could take a bit of work. But learning to track straight is first on that list. Then it's about power application, smooth to get nice loops, and then a very fast haul.
So for me, I think the accuracy technique, casting foot forwards, straight over the shoulder, I think for me that's about what, 100 and just over 100, maybe 106, maybe doing it like that.
Yeah,
it's very difficult to go any further. I'm sure it's possible, but for me that's what it is. And then open stance, as you know, is exactly the same technique, but you've just moved your body around. For me, that's maybe 116, I think, was my furthest by doing that. That was being consistent. And then, well, I don't usually count like the things that go over that. I like to measure things in consistency. And then after that, the 170, that's certainly way further. I mean, you're talking like 120 foot plus. Well, depending on the condition, of course. If you've got wind, it can go 130, 140. But without winds there, I think, well, certainly, I think we should discuss that a little bit as well. So
so let me just come in there. So you're right, that's how I find it. But you're 106, I'm 105. You're 116, I'm 110 to 115. Occasionally it goes to 120, but it's not. I know Steve Rager certainly does that. He's very powerful, got a very fast haul. He can throw 120 with that, you know, when it comes together. But it's at 170 for me. That is a 120 foot plus. Now you're going to come on to the wind, because we've both seen lots of distances posted in the last couple of years, which are 140s and even some 150s, I think. There's no question those are wind assisted, because for me, 120 feet is still the mark.
Yeah.
I know we can throw 130s. I've certainly thrown 130s even in a very slight breeze, but that breeze is here. And without it, and there are times, especially when the air is dead, or it's drizzling rain, it can be really, and no wind at all. It's really, I think, you're doing really well to throw 120 feet, like exceptionally well. There are not many. I've been in the finals in the World Championships twice with casts of less than 120 feet. So that's in the top 8. One was about 115, I think, and one was it was still less than 120. Okay, so it's definitely, so those numbers we get are very much that we're seeing recently. So if you're kind of getting into that, don't get put off by seeing these huge distances, because it's not real. I mean, it's real, but it's in different conditions. The key for me is what's it like when it's calm.
And I think people can be put off by that, because, wow, 100 foot with a 5-weight, I still think is a damn good cast. Yeah. That is really good. Certainly 100, and exactly the same for me, Paul. 120 feet with the MED 5, that is like, yes, you're there.
Yeah, that's the gold star, isn't it? That's a really great cast. Yeah, and I just don't think it's physically possible. I might be wrong. I don't think there's a lot more there, and there's certainly not what we are seeing. I mean, I do think there is more. I mean, I don't think we've peaked out, but with the tackle that we've got, and there has been some changes in the tackle. I know we're using stiffer rods, for example, and that does make a small difference. Not as much as people would think, but there's definitely a few feet as a result of that.
It's not like 30 feet as a lot of people think.
No, it's 3 feet, something like that. The most. We did do that. So we got all with what we had the making of the British team at a Sexy Loops meet, and we tried casting with my HT6. We tried an 8-weight, and I think we had either 2 8s and a 10, or an 8 and 2 10s, and we all did it, and we all cast. And there was the 10-weight through the furthest and the 6-weight through the shortest. But the difference between the two was, for most, was only a couple of feet. Some people, for most people, in fact, who aren't competitive, they would lose distance, because you've got to make adjustments when you're casting a very stiff rod with a light line like that. But for those who can make the adjustments, there is a gain. But it's certainly, if it's the most, I think we had 5 or 6 feet for one. I think that was me actually made the difference, which annoyed me, because in the World Championships the previous year, I was using the HT6, and everybody had already worked this out and using 8 and 10 weights. And I threw the same distance that I threw in that competition with my rod, but with the 10, I threw 6 feet further. So had I known this in Norway the previous year, I might have won. Now, there's a next thing I was going to ask, is when you train, when you go out and practice, do you have a specific plan every time you go out?
Yes, that's a great thing that we should discuss, I think, Paul, because I don't think we've actually discussed it properly, or certainly I haven't read much about it. And I've likened it to what I used to do with the piano, like my piano practice. So I'll set targets and I'll set goals, like what do I want to do today, or what do I want to improve on? And I usually start it off by starting up with a warm-up exercise, whether that's accuracy or just doing some spays on the water or something. So I'll start off with something just to get me warmed up, say, and then and then I'll focus on something that I feel I'm good at. So like on the piano, I used to play this one piece, and I knew I was good at that, and that sort of puts you in a good mindset, thinking, right, that's a really good start. I want to take this further. So in the fly casting world, for me, that's trying to hit, say, just trying to hit 100 feet before the competition practice begins. So I'll just try and hit 100 feet as nicely as I can. So with minimum force, just really nice, just like as the least amount of effort I can put in, thinking, yes, I've got this, got it pretty consistent, say 10 casts, maybe it's nice and consistent. And then I'll move on to the competition side. So then I'll start to work on carry. So I'll get my carry up to where I feel it's really comfortable. And if there's a fault or something, and it's really interesting actually, because I've got this from like my piano practice. If I find a fault, I'll work on that fault in isolation. So if it's just the back cast, then I'll lay the line on the floor. I'll only do back cast. I'll spin round, back cast, spin round, back cast. And then I'll do that. I'm thinking, okay, yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. The fly leg's nice and straight and everything. And I'm not twisting round or doing anything strange. And then I think this is the key as well, not just to work on that thing in isolation, because if you just do that and go home and then come back, you're not incorporating it into the whole cast. So then once I've done it nice, say 10 times, I'll gradually work it back into the whole cast. So I'll do a back cast and then I'll do a forward cast, back cast, forward cast, just let it lie on the ground. And then I'll work on carry and then get it up to a point where it's thinking, okay, yes, I've got this down pretty good now. And then after I've got my carry practice sorted out, I'll then just blast off a few distances, right? Because that's always fun, just to see how far you can cast. And then do that for a good few casts. And then after that, I'll end with a nice fun exercise, whether that's spays or just trying to do mends and little bits and pieces. And then that will be my that'll be the end. And then after that, I'm thinking, what can I do differently next time? I was thinking, okay, so I've sorted out my back cast now. It's to a place where I really want it to be. What can I do next time to improve? And then when I come back home, I'll just set some goals. Next time, I want to carry 92 feet.
Yeah, I think they have to go out with a plan. You can't just go out and have a few casts and do do whatever it is. You actually have to, to set tasks for yourself to try and a lot of people might be tempted just to do what they're good at, but I liken these 4 disciplines. You've got accuracy, distance, space, and presentation casts. And I think you could easily divide your time quite consistently between the 4. But of those 4, I don't know about you, I most train distance, but I don't forget the other ones, right? So I do specifically go out and work on them. And there's a lot of casts in that. There's like 20 odd spay casts, right? If you go down
a
to
lot,
it.
isn't it? A lot.
You just end up using, you might just practice 1 or 2 of them, So there's a lot there to work on. But I definitely go out and I specifically train I train all of them over enough period of time. Like if I'm going, for example, if I'm off to Spain, I know I've got to spend time working on presentation casts because they're all very good at that, and that's what they do. And I don't want to look out of place, right? So I really tune it up. But it's also a lot of the training, like here right now where I'm focused, is about making. Sorry, that's a couple of geckos I think having the fight. I'm really focused on my shots, and I really need to keep on top of that. That's the most important thing, is to be able to make a fast shot on the money, because in a day here, you might get 3 or 4 shots in a day to fish. 4
That's not
shots
a
in a day is not enough to practice taking shots. You know, in an hour or half an hour, I can practice, you know, taking hundreds and hundreds of shots and dial it in. So anyway, so I do think you've really got to have a plan to go out. So, for example, I do Zoom lessons and courses, right? Usually over a period of about 6 months, and they usually come every second week, right? So I will set them 4 or 5 tasks for them to work on for the next 2 weeks. And when they've built that, they come back and then we work on something else. And I set another 4 or 5 or 6 tasks for them to train. So, and I think that's, you know, I think knowing what to focus on is one thing, but actually going out there and doing it is really the key, I think, to improvement.
And maybe it's mentally as well, because not everybody likes to go to a field and just chuck a line around. Like,
yeah, I mean, usually there's somewhere you would hope. I mean, I guess some people would have to travel, but a lot of people kind of have somewhere close to them where they could go, but they might feel a bit silly. And I think that prevents quite a few people just going off and casting in a football field, because you're going to get asked, have you caught any fish yet? Or you're going to say, there's no fish here. Or, you know, it's going to be like that. But after a while, they just get used to you. And if you can talk to yourself while you're doing it, they'll avoid you anyway.
it will definitely give you a wide berth for that, won't they?
But that's definitely because you don't need specific gear to practice. You can just, you know, your line's going to get pretty beat up. You know, there's no question about that. Absolutely. But you have to train. I mean, if you don't train your casting, you're not going to improve. You don't improve through fishing. So you have to find a way of doing it. And it can't be when you've got flies on the end, because you're fishing and you're not training. You could maybe take half an hour out of your day to train. I don't know, when you're on the lake fishing. But you should be fit. Ideally, you should be doing what you're doing, which is casting every day, or at least 4 or 5 times of the week. And then I don't know how often you fish. Hopefully you fish every day, but I'm guessing you certainly fish, not this time of year, but you know, weekends and evenings.
Yeah, and so days a week fishing, yeah.
So I guess there's maybe a lack of incentive for people who only go fishing once a year on an annual holiday. But I tell you, if that annual holiday to the Seychelles, they should be practicing their casting.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, it does make a huge difference. But there isn't lack. So the motivation for me is it's actually fun. Casting is enjoyable. I go out there and I cast. Sometimes I put some music on. I cast to the beats. You know, I actually go out there and I relax. And it's always convenient. I know you say you keep a rod kept up inside. I've always been in a lucky position where I can just step outside and cast, even if it's not the ideal situation, and maybe it's a small garden. Here it's easy. I just stand on the roof or go on one of the boats. So that's not a problem. But I've always been in that situation where I've had a rod kept up, even if like you're at the office, right, and you have a car park and you have lunch. You can go out for 20 minutes and eat your sandwiches while you're casting in the car park. I know lots of people do that. It's going to kill the line for sure, but you can go out there and have fun. I know that when I was running Sexy Loops, and I know it's not very stressful, but there might be times when it's a little bit stressful. And I would, you know, having an argument with Frank on the board, I'm like, oh, I must get rid of that stress. I'll go and pick the rod up, go outside, cast for 10 minutes, and I'll feel good again, and I'll come back in. So it's that has lots of benefits. Every time I cast, it automatically relaxes me.
Have I spoken to you about my balloons? I don't think I have. What I used to do, and this is going to the club as well, because this was like the first time I did it, and going back to what you said, they probably think I'm absolutely mental. Well, I've got a load of microphone stands, right? And what I used to do was I used to take these mic stands to the fishing club, and I used to blow up these balloons and just tape them to the mic stands. And then no one no one around or anything, no one behind me. I used to put on a fly. I used to pop the balloons with the fly, and I'm thinking, I bet. And then some guy turned up. It was hilarious. He saw me doing this because it was like by the car park. He drove in, he saw me, did a U-turn, and just left. And I was thinking, oh, sorry, man, I didn't mean to scare you there. Thinking this mental guy's just flailing around with these balloons, thinking, oh, he's probably just broken in. So then I thought about, okay, then let's try some other cool little things. So then what I used to do, just going back to like tracking and stuff, I used to put a balloon in front of me and one 180 degrees behind me, and then took the fly off because it got expensive, right? You had to buy a new pack of balloons every time you popped them. So I took the fly off, and then I used to try and just hit the balloons with the loop backwards and forwards at about, because they're quite tall, Mike, about like 10 feet in the air. And then I'd vary them. So then I'd make maybe the rear balloon a little bit lower, the one in front a little bit higher, so I could vary trajectories and just try and hit the balloon. And if you got a really tight loop, especially with the leader, sometimes the leader would pop the balloon. So even then, I had to take it off, for God's sake. Then I had to get that down and then tape on another balloon. So that's like that's like a fun little thing of doing stuff like that. Ring as well. I used to tape some hula hoops to a mic stand, try and get them through as well. That's really good fun. That is. So I think it's variety. I think as you say, is and not getting too caught up in, yes, I'm just doing distance, and everything else seems to drop off.
Yeah,
and
I think it's really important. I mean, all the best distance casters, you often hear they're a one horse pony, or they're only good for one thing, which is throwing distance, which is absolutely not true, because all the distance casters are really good because they've developed all their casting. Like a lot of them anyway, particularly like a lot of the guys we cast with, are really great spay casters. With the single-handed too. They're most train the accuracy as well, so they've built up a huge variety already within their stroke. So I think that aspect of training is important, but it also, you're right, it keeps it more interesting. It keeps it more fun. I like the lumi-line. I like casting to music after dark with this luminous fly line in the air and making aerialized spay casts and long carries and then short snaps and everything else. Just having fun, just enjoying myself casting, because it is fun. It's once you've developed your abilities, your skill level, it becomes fun just casting. Yes. It's not just about the fish.
I used to do that on my mate's farm as well. Took the lumi-line, and obviously I didn't really like to go to the fishing club, because where the road going down, it is close to the water pools. Thinking maybe it's not the best idea to go around here at night. So, I mean, my friend's got a quite a large pond down the bottom of his garden. He lives on a farm. Got some big carp in there, which is good fun in the summer to catch on damsels and stuff as well, that they tend to eat. But anyway, that's a segue to what I was going to say about the lumi-line, because he's got so much space as well, and the light pollution is so low there. Oh man, it is amazing casting that thing. And what I tend to do as well is I like to take a UV torch, and it's a powerful UV torch, and I'll get all the line out, and and you'll see me as well. I think he's taken a video of me doing this. I'll put the torch on with the line on the ground, and I'll just run along with the torch to just make it like, whoa, this is like bright. as it
Yeah.
bright as anything. And just seeing that as well, especially with the 170 casting that thing as well, and you'll just see it not well, not as much as the MED, it doesn't suck itself up, but I think we discussed as well. I think that's the best way to cast a double taper is with the 170.
Yeah.
And you'll just see that, and it's just wicked. It's like there is a film, and the character's called Whiplash. I can't remember what the film is, and he like cuts cars in half with these whips made of I think it's electricity, and that's what I feel like when I'm casting the Lumen. I was thinking, yes, this feels awesome, and it looks cool because I mean it's a great line pull. You need to make more, man.
I know.
I know.
I've got some more coming actually. I absolutely love them. I honestly think it's been one of the things that's made me a better fly caster, because all you see is the loops. I've definitely developed casts as a result of it. You know, a lot of that aerialized stuff came from the lumi-line, and it's been great fun. I had a group of guys visit. I used to do these meets in Hungary, and there was a lot of instructors from all around the surrounding countries coming and staying for the weekend. And one guy said, "Come on, you must come and see this." And I had two lumi-lines, and it turned into a fight. It always turns into a fight with instructors. And this guy had wrapped the line around the other guy, and he was on the ground, and he was kicking him while he was down.
That's hilarious. Oh wow.
We had rules. We had it's like Fight Club with lumi-lines, you know. We had rules, and it could get quite nasty, and you could get quite a whipping.
Yeah, it hurts, doesn't it?
Can do. A bit of pullback.
Oh, great. And for the viewers that don't know what the lumi-line is, it's your glow in the dark fly line, isn't it? Which is an intermediate taper.
It is. It's an intermediate 6. I've got some more coming. Double taper, 100 feet long. I think my one I've measured at 97, as it turns out. So there's always a little bit of differences between what they should and what they shouldn't, but that's just the way they make fly lines. But
you're going to make different weights or just the 6?
Sorry?
You're going to make different weights or just the 6, do you think?
Well, let's see. I mean, fly lines is not really a big part of what we do. I think maybe at some point in the future, but we are much more interested in rods. What's coming is more 6 weights. A 7 would be nice to go with the HT7, but we shall see. There are other ones being made at the moment. And I've got one from SA, which is a luminous line. I haven't actually had to cast with it yet, but it's like some sort of bug taper or something that they use, and I think it's in a 9 or a 10. I can't remember, but I'll have a play with that and see what that's like.
Sounds interesting.
It's the important thing is that how long does a charge last for, and we've got a very long charge. It's like usually about 20 minutes, 25 minutes. So I'd recharge it. There'll still be some glow after about half an hour with what we've got, and that's because it's on an intermediate, and that's so the charge lasts even longer. It's a bit of a pain if you're casting on the water and you're teaching, because it's gone, you know. So you've got to lift it back out again. But for just casting practice, I can't think of a more fun toy, you know.
It is. It's amazing. I'm gutted that I only just got one as well.
Yeah.
You know how many?
I've got some more coming. I have to. Rio stopped making lines for other companies, but I had an order that was in prior to this, so I've got a box waiting for me. So I must.
Oh, you got a back order with them.
Get that to come over. Sorry.
You've got a back order with them.
Yeah. No, I've got 50 lines coming.
Oh, nice.
I don't know what we'll do after that, but I have a couple in the boat that I use. I have one stuck on a trunk. I stuck on a tree trunk because on the boat, and it was so high up I couldn't get it back. So I got it wrapped and wrapped and wrapped and wrapped. So I ended up just leaving it all there. Waited for the lake to come up 3 months later, and I could untie it.
Because I know we've talked about casting and everything, but I think it's casting with someone, I think. So if you don't mind, I'll just share some BFCC stuff if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
Just for sharing where people can go. So British Fly Casting Club, great bunch of guys, really friendly, and it's not like a strict teaching environment, so to speak. It's more like a social gathering of really like-minded individuals, and we do everything. So as I say, it's basically a relaxed social club, really. We put on accuracy and distance competitions. So we have accuracy competitions that we start off with, and then we move on to the distance stuff. So for the distance competitions, we start off with the heavy stuff like the two-handed stuff and T38, etc. And then in the afternoon, we move on to the 5.7 and then the ST27, which is a 27-gram shooting head for the sea trout. As well for the price. I mean, it's £20 a year, man, for the whole year, and that's a full membership, and you get one-to-one lessons with some of the best instructors in the UK. I mean, that's a deal and a half. I mean, you could be paying what, 35 quid for an hour, especially, well, Draycott, they charge about that just for an hour, I think. So you're getting some really
yeah. I'm 70 quid an hour, so 20 quid for a year is exceptionally good value. And you've got Mark Surtees there who's outstanding instructor, and he's not just focused on, he's not focused on the competitors either. He's focused on fishing casters, often guys who can't double haul. So you can really start. You get a good start. You can get a good move. You can get a good shove up the ladder from attending that at any level, really. I always used to go to the end of the year one because that was at Brentwood, which is very close to where I am. So we would make a weekend out of it and have a group of our normal casting group will stay for the weekend, and then we'd all go there on a Sunday morning hungover.
Closing advice, if you could give somebody one thing to do, what would that be, Paul? Do you reckon?
Oh, a lot of people would say get a lesson, but I don't think that's the most important thing to do. I think the most important thing is to go out and have fun training. You'll want to get lessons and so on. I mean, but the guys I'm teaching, because I do a lot of online lessons now, they're all training 5 days a week. In fact, they're training 5 or more days a week before they even come to me. So, and you can see it. You know the difference between somebody who's been training and goes out and practices their casting from somebody who doesn't do any of that and just goes fishing. You can immediately tell. And that is the key. If you take a lesson and you don't train, you're not going to improve. The key is the training, and then if you can supplement that with some lessons to go directed you to what to train and have somebody look at your casting, that's the optimum.
Completely agree, Paul. And just like one last thing from me as well, I think if anyone was going to practice just one thing, I think it should be accuracy. I think, because distance is just accuracy a bit faster, and I think it's everything straight. You think?
Yeah, I think you should practice two things.
You always like giving more than one thing, don't you, Paul?
I have to say, I mean, I don't know what, for me anyway, I found distance to be the most beneficial to my fishing, because it taught me what works and what doesn't work at a certain distance, and so it's made my stroke more direct. Whereas accuracy, yes, it's tracking and stuff is all very important too, but you can get away with a lot of things at targets that you can't get away with at distance. So I think they're very important. But I do think you need to train accuracy as well and do it with targets.
So there you go. That conversation was so long that I nearly fell asleep by the end of it. Hopefully you find that useful. Really great talking there to Nick. If you've got any questions, you can stick them in below and maybe we can actually help maybe answer them. I'm off fishing. Cheers.